This podcast is brought to you by the Startup Core Podcast and by The Complete Guide to Happiness with Dr. Fantastic.
The Final Frontier Podcast. These are the voyages of Jake Boger and Justin Spur. Our weekly mission: to explore memories of Star Trek's strange new worlds, to recall the search for new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has had the spare time to go before. You ready to go?
Yes, let's talk Star Trek. I've got so much to say about one half of one episode. The rest of it, not so much.
Right. So welcome everyone to the Final Frontier, our little vanity project. If you're around our comments section, you'll get the reference. We are
Thanks
talking
for the essay, dude.
I mean, okay, so here's the thing. I'm not going to read the comment again because it's lengthy. I can't tell if he's trying to be condescending or if it just kind of, maybe I took it that way. I don't know, but it's just I chuckled a bit because but yeah, it's our vanity project. But anyway, today we are talking about the Menagerie parts 1 and 2. So it's a double episode. But since this is essentially one episode doubled in length by footage from a different episode,
Yeah.
we're just going to treat this as one because I did find it was funny. I found myself really into this as long as it wasn't footage from the pilot.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that because I was dying. You know how hard I resisted just skipping the pilot footage? I was like, I'm feeling like it ruins the spirit of this if I do this, but I've already seen this.
It does, and I'm glad I didn't because I caught some very, very subtle editing differences, which I have a note on later, so we won't forget that. But as stated before, this is the Menagerie, parts 1 and 2. These episodes take place between stardate 3012.4 and 3012.6. Show date is the year 2267, and the original air dates were November 17th and 24th of 1966. Technically speaking, this episode is written by Gene Roddenberry. There was an initial script that was written first, but Roddenberry hated it so much that he rewrote basically 80% of it. And the new segments were directed by Mark Daniels. And I'm sorry, I forgot. It's in our pilot.
Name.
Yeah, I think we've seen him before. He's a veteran director by this point in Star Trek. The original director of the pilot also gets directing credit because most of these 2 episodes was actually footage from the pilot. So,
yes,
fun fact.
Yes, it was.
Another fun fact: this is the only 2-part episode in Star Trek: The Original Series.
Really?
It's the only 2-parter.
I would have just cold hard guessed, assumed that the mirror universe episode would have been 2 parts as well. That's what I thought.
That's one. I think the Deep Space Nine Mirror Universe episode is a 2-parter. I could be wrong though. And 2-parters.
Sure the Enterprise one is. Well,
I think you're right. Where Sato is somehow like the captain.
Is it? No, sorry, it's not that because I always thought the Mirror Universe was the series finale. No, but the series finale of Enterprise is what's his face?
William Riker in the holodeck.
Yeah. It turns out that the whole show is just William Riker in the holodeck.
No, it's actually only the last episode.
Oh, is it only the last episode?
Yeah, they do. It was a bit of a wah wah. I really wish they would have gotten there at least one more season.
My thing is always end your end your show. Never end your show on a cliffhanger. Always end your seasons at least somewhat satisfyingly in case you don't get called back.
Yeah, for real. But that was right when Enterprise was starting to really hit its stride. So it seems actually we all hardcore Trekkies know why it got canceled anyway. And we'll we'll dig into that really hard when we finally get to Star Trek
We'll
Enterprise.
get
So
there.
like, share, and subscribe so we can get there because apparently the competition out there is stiff.
If competition.
This episode was a solution to a growing problem in the show's early production, the special effects time. The special effects for Star Trek were admittedly uh, unprecedented in 1966. I
Imagine.
mean, the level of that's why I always give it credit because, like, while the special effects and makeup, actually, a lot of it's still pretty good. I shouldn't even bring up the makeup.
I
Um,
mean, the makeup, I'm gonna bring up a certain character's makeup later on because the makeup in this episode was good.
yeah, but the special effects are kind of laughable by today's standards by some people. I don't think so because I mean, the transporter effect is still, it's
It looks
essentially
good.
It's essentially the same thing we do today. It's just done a little bit differently, but the effect is
Yeah,
largely the same.
absolutely. Yeah.
And we no longer have to use a still image to overlay the effect. We can now animate it. But again, it has its genesis here.
There's
Um,
the occasional moment of like characters being like, and action, but other
yeah,
than that, like
but for
it looks good.
66, but for 66, and
Exactly.
the other thing you have to understand too is that on a broadcast television in 1966, you probably couldn't see it to the same degree that you see on, say, a digital television
No, not as
today.
clearly as we're seeing it. No, that's
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
it was probably quite seamless for the eyes of television on that day. But the fact remains, this was a very special effects heavy episode, and virtually every episode took longer than anticipated, and it was accumulating effects. So this was building a backlog of episodes that were waiting for special effects to, get completed. Shows getting delivered to NBC later and later. In order to fulfill their series commitment on time, Roddenberry wrote this two-part episode that needed only 1 week of production. So 1 week of production for two episodes.
Interesting, because it a lot of this feels like filler, for
It,
lack of
you
a
know,
better word.
in a way it is, but it's a different kind of.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I suppose in a way it's filler because filler exists to bridge
pad
the gap,
out.
yeah, between the source material running out of material and
Yeah.
keeping the. So
Okay,
yeah,
so
it's unique filler though because there is a story
yes.
here and a damn good one.
I really like the first part of this episode and the ending of the second part. But I do have my notes on that. They're not really deep notes. I didn't get the second episode because I assumed it was just like the same as the first part, but it's just Pike is back, and obviously this is our first multi-parter, which we have already discussed. They did mention something about Spock, but I thought that was kind of I didn't realize how much of a part he was gonna play in this drama.
Oh, I mean, he's it.
He is
He
the
is the
drama.
drama.
He's like, am I the drama?
Spock is all the drama. But our story begins with the Enterprise arriving at Starbase 11 in response to a subspace call First Officer Spock reported receiving from the former captain of the Enterprise, Christopher Pike. Commodore
Um,
Mendez, the
yep.
Starbase commander, informs Captain Kirk that Pike could not have sent any message as a recent accident has left him with locked-in syndrome, unable to move or communicate other than answering yes/no questions with the aid of a device operated by his brainwaves.
So it's funny. We spoke earlier prior to shooting. You said you didn't have many notes. I've got so many notes on this scene. So like, just like strap in, folks. Number one, in previous episodes, I stated that we had not been to a nice planet on the show yet. This planet looks nice for once. I love the set design. Like I love the background paintings. I love how it looked. It reminded me of Coruscant from Star Wars. Like it's like a planet that's just like a building. It's just like a metropolis. That was really cool. And then I was wondering if it was headquarters, which we find out it's not, because clearly it's not Earth, because Earth is way close, unless Earth is way closer to Saturn in the future.
No, they're a ways off, so that just happens to be a planet with rings. It was funny. I know the shot you're talking about, and it simultaneously looked great and cheap.
Yeah, but like for me it was I really like the perspective of seeing like the people way in the distance. I was like, that, considering that's probably just like, as you put it, a painting in the background, is an impressive effect for 1966. Like it makes the space look way bigger than I'm sure it probably was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Her hair blowing in the wind looks so unnatural.
Oh, you
I
noticed
think
that
I saw.
too. Yeah, it looks
Yeah,
super fake.
yeah. I was like, what is happening with her hair?
Which, and I'm also I so this might be weird to me, and this is why at many points in this show we'll get some hate from like hardcore Trekkies, even though I consider myself one. I'm not. I'm not going to argue over like some of the finer details, but it seems kind of silly to me that a star base is on a planetary surface.
I mean, I just kind of assumed that was just that's just what they called it. Like, it's just a name.
I suppose, but to me, Starbase, but okay,
If it's
and to
Starfleet based off
well,
Starfleet.
and I mean, I imagine so, yes. And to be fair, there are space stations in the series, and they are a different thing. So maybe
Yeah,
I'm probably conflating the two. Um,
I, being pedantic as I am, did not put that connection together. But I do have a connection about Starfleet that's coming when we introduce the next characters.
What I found interesting, though, and one of which again, I'm not faulting the show at all for this, but this is taking place in the 23rd century, and as of today, and realistically, as of the 1980s, or certainly by the 90s, we had progressed past this system that Ike is using.
Which system?
The
Oh,
the the beeping, the beeping for yes
well,
and no.
okay. So we've got to we're at Pike. What Pike looks like? We're
Yeah.
there.
Yep.
Because first thought on Pike is, oh my god, I get that reference now from South Park. It's the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
kindergarten teacher Trent Boy. Yeah, I was like, holy shit! Like I love it. When, like for me, I love the thing about appreciating old shit as I've gotten older is it makes me retroactively appreciate pop culture references. Like unrelated, but at time of recording, I am knee deep in Halloween specials, and I'm watching the Treehouse of Horror episodes, and there's just so many of those bits where I like the Freddy Krueger Willie groundskeeper Willie is Freddy Krueger. I appreciated that like so much more watching this because I've watched all those movies now, so it's like it's going back and be like, hey, that's where that's from. It's so much more fun than recognizing it the first time for me.
Yeah, it's always great when I actually find it a little bit more entertaining when you get a reference retroactively.
Yes, totally. I
Yeah,
know.
and
Yeah.
then you're like, oh, that's right. It's kind of like where now I didn't get to enjoy that with South Park the way you did because the Planetarium episode because I had seen that episode of Star Trek before, so I recognized it.
Oh,
I still found it funny,
it's
but
funny in
there's
its own way, but yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm trying to remember what movie that was because I hadn't seen this movie for a very long time. And it was like, as I'm watching it, I'm like, I get so many. Oh, Dirty Dancing. The first time I watched Dirty Dancing, I'm like, oh, I get so many
Oh yeah.
references now.
A lot of
So many.
80s movies when I watch them, I go, oh, so that's where Family Guy got that from. That
Yeah,
happens to me a
yeah,
lot.
yep,
Family
absolutely.
Guy's the one where he loves his 80s shit, where I'm like, oh, okay, I get this now.
Well, because it's awesome. But what I'm talking about with Pike, he is only able to communicate using the beeping light, whereas you
Yeah.
have apparatus like what Stephen Hawking had,
Yeah. Oh yeah,
which
yeah,
he
yeah, yeah. Fair point. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, which he uses his eye. If I'm not mistaken, he uses his eye to guide his, digital keyboard to type out what to say, which that's just wild to me.
Not to be dark, but used past tense.
Oh, valid, used.
Used but yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, to be fair, everyone made fun of that. Although apparently he heard well, I think if I'm getting this right, which I'm sure I'm not, his particular tone of voice that he used, it was like copyright protected. So like whenever they parodied him in like movies and television stuff, that's why it always sounded slightly different. Was because they weren't actually allowed to use, because that's like akin to like theft or something. Which is why when he actually guest stars, it sounds right. It's because yeah, he has some sort of like legal or had some sort of legal claim over that particular computer output. But I could be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure I heard
I,
that somewhere
I
though.
I don't know, but theoretically, I'm believe me, I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, but
Theoretically, that is now his voice.
that's what I'm pretty sure I've heard that before. Like he had some sort of, I don't know if it's copyright or some sort of legal ownership over it.
It
Yeah.
might fall into likeness rights.
Yeah, I would say likeness rights, yeah.
I'm
But
not sure though.
so that's interesting. Yeah, you're right. Now that you say that, this does feel like a very 1960s solution to dealing with an invalid. My thing, I've got so many notes
But
but
how could they in their defense, how could they know?
how could they know? Well, I mean, they theoretically, I know, yeah, you're right. I don't know what they, my thing was like, wait, the thing has to be pushed around? That just seems
All
cumbersome.
right. Well, they say he can operate it a little bit with his brainwave, so they kind of make it clear that it's at one point she even says like he can back it up a little.
Interesting. I mean, for me, it just kind of became apparent that like outside of the show, this thing was very clearly very heavy, and it took
Very.
3 of them to push it.
Because I was like, it's one of those things where it's like we're in space and yet wheels. Like,
Right. Well, I think is like I was expecting it to like Dalek like float a little bit, where like we didn't see the mechanism that was moving it, like the wheels moving it, but like give the thing, give the
yeah,
thing
but
wheels that
wheels.
hide it, and then make it look lighter. It was a very strange scene of them wheeling him out. I'm like,
Yeah,
this is
it
that's
seems
later,
extremely heavy and cumbersome.
right? But
Absolutely.
also in regards to Pike, his makeup is good. Like it is awful and upsetting looking. Like it is like it just he looks uncomfortable. Like it looks good. I'm like impressive. When good
Yeah.
makeup, good quality makeup.
Yeah, and the other thing I noticed though, which it's not a funny scene, but I just had to chuckle because at some point in the episode, actually I think it's later, but I'll address it now. It's in Kirk's log. That's what he does. And he specifically says a space accident. I'm like, did we really have to designate it as a space accident? Like, I
I
mean,
mean,
just say the man
I
had an
have a note
accident.
about some space racism later, so it's okay. I'm with it. I'm with it. I think have we talked about this before? The symbol on their shirts are different. The girl and his. They're not
Yeah,
Starfleet symbols.
and this is a thing that
Starfleet
doesn't
symbols.
I don't think it comes back, or if it comes back, it comes back sparingly. So like this obviously would be like the Space Navy. I think that's pretty
Yeah.
clear. A starbase theoretically might be more classified as like army operations, so maybe it's a
Oh,
different
okay.
crest, but eventually this becomes the default symbol for just the Federation's military.
I thought maybe it was like he was of higher rank, and that's why he had a different
See,
symbol.
I thought that too, but
But
his
she also has a different
yeah,
symbol.
and,
Yeah.
and I don't and she's not even an officer, I don't think, and she's certainly junior to Kirk.
They mentioned that Spock was with Pike for 11 years. That's a long time. So how long in relation has he been with Kirk at this point?
I'm not sure about Kirk, however, it has been 13 years since the
Yeah, they do
cage.
say that later on. Yeah, 13 years. I was like, oh wow, okay. So that's quite a length of time.
Yeah, so it
So I,
Spock's loyalty makes sense, you know.
so I guess 11 of those years he was with Pike, and then 2 years he's been with Kirk, I guess,
No, 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 no.
theoretically.
So it's been 13 years from the events of the pilot to this point in the show.
Oh, I see. And but at the point of pilot, how long had Spock been with Pike?
I don't think they say, but
Interesting.
that
Interesting.
would be a question for Strange New Worlds, which we will get to
Fair,
eventually.
fair.
Pike refuses to communicate with anyone except Spock. After Kirk and Mendez leave to discuss the situation, Spock reveals, over Pike's repeated no signals, that he intends to carry out a plan that he has made. Fun fact though, although the scenes in the cage feature Jeffrey Hunter, the original actor that plays Captain Pike, he was unavailable and unaffordable uh, to reprise his role as Captain
Oh
Pike in
yeah, I
this
had that
episode.
question. I was like, is it the same? Is it the same actor playing
I
him in
had
the chair?
I had the same one because honestly, I thought maybe, but they got Sean Kenny, who resembled Hunter apparently, and did heavy makeup effects too. I think the original story was different somehow, but yeah, Captain Pike has to be disabled for this story to work.
Yeah. He does.
Which
Yeah, he does.
means, which well, I'll say that later, but it turns out, and I didn't even put this together, which is sad because I know about this episode. They took my advice finally on Star Trek. After these many episodes, they finally took my advice. Mendez confirms that there is no record of any messages sent to the Enterprise. He provides Kirk with classified information on the planet Talos IV, which was visited by the Enterprise previously under Pike's command in 2254 and is now under a strict quarantine. Spock, meanwhile, commandeers the Enterprise by means of falsified recordings of Kirk's voice, places Pike under McCoy's care, and orders the ship to depart under the computer's control. Kirk and Mendez give chase in a shuttlecraft. After several hours, though, Spock learns from the computer that the shuttlecraft does not have enough fuel to return to the starbase. So we're getting some, like, I actually put a note at some point, it's like sneaky Spock.
Don't be suspicious. 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 Don't be suspicious.
Because he's
Yeah. Well,
creeping.
I think I have a couple notes about Spock's deception. This deception is remarkably well thought out and very elaborate.
It's not that
My
well
thing was
thought
like,
out.
where did he get that? Where did he get the exact vocal replica of like half the crew? Like that to me, that was impressive. I'm like, impressive move, sir.
Well, I will reveal an editing trick. Considering in the year 2024, AI is pretty good.
Okay, fair enough.
I could imagine that in 2267, it's stellar. I will say this much: I've taken to on many of the podcasts we do the opening sponsorship bumper. You might hear a voice that does not sound familiar. That is my voice.
But I use her voice character from CapCut, and it
Completely changes it.
I love doing that. It's super fun.
It's the Plath effect.
Like Oliver Plath? Oliver?
No. Jordan's Plath.
Oh,
You're not from Missouri?
I love the night shot when it showed the set lit up for night. I was like, that looks really cool. I really like that. Kirk be flirting when the girl shows up. Kirk be flirting.
Yeah, well, especially was like I forget her friend's name that told her about Kirk, and when she mentions her name, Kirk gets very concerned, and I'm just like, wow, Kirk, damn son, how do you have time? How did you have time?
Sure. I'm not sure what happened with Helen Johansson, but that is some legit panic. You know, he's like, oh, what did she say? Oh no.
What is it with Kirk and Helen's?
Right,
Helen Noel.
I wasn't sure if that was a character that had been in a previous episode. And I was like, is that the girl that he got hypnotized into falling in love with? Was that Helen?
Helen Noel, though.
Oh no, my God! So it wasn't. So maybe he, for a brief moment, thought it was the same Helen.
Oh, that would have been funny.
And then Spock commandeering the ship. Spock tossed that man like he was nothing. And I just remember, Leonard Nimoy tossed that man like he was nothing. Leonard Nimoy is strong, apparently. Like that.
Apparently,
I mean, I guess the guy probably assisted.
I was going to say it's choreographed action, but I'm kind of. So this is why I say Spock's plan wasn't great. So Spock should have dispatched that technician with the nerve pinch rather than try to wrestle him, because at any point this gentleman could have stopped wrestling him and been like, intruder alert.
My favorite part is when the guy's going for the thing and then he throws him away and he goes back for it again. Then he tosses him. And it's like, yeah, you're right. I think he ends it by nerve pinching him. Doesn't he nerve pinch him when he first enters? And then he wakes up?
There's another guy. No. So there's
it's a second guy. Oh, they all look similar people when they're wearing the same uniform.
Which I have to chuckle to. Which again, I'm not faulting the show for this, because this was actually pretty. It would have been state of the art at the time when Spock opens the box and there's just the ever so little circuit board inside.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's just like the little tiny motherboard inside that big old box. But that was, I mean, that
was high tech.
That's how it was, man. That's how it was.
Yeah,
and now
same. Oh, sorry.
And now all of that computing power exists in this.
Right, a little bitty chip. It's like this. So have we seen the report? You mentioned the report, but I paused it to read it because I always love reading paperwork in movies and stuff. The report references Starfleet. Is this the first official reference to Starfleet in the show by name?
No, I don't believe so. I think we've heard it sparingly.
Have we?
Before.
Okay,
I believe. But yeah, this would have been around the time where Starfleet and I think we've heard Starfleet. I don't know if we've heard the Federation yet.
Interesting. Okay. And then I couldn't remember what Spock's position in the ship was because they called him Science Officer Spock. And I feel like we talked about this before, but he's first officer now. That's a promotion, right?
No, so technically, this is another thing, because there's also a moment later where Spock relinquishes command, where he gives it to some third lieutenant, and and technically next in line is Scotty, but obviously they have not established the chain of command in the show yet. And even let's assume that Scotty's unavailable for some reason. Even then, McCoy outranks the lieutenant given, but the logic there might be because McCoy is probably not part of the chain of command, being the chief medical officer. You kind of need him in sickbay, which is why, though, there's numerous times where McCoy seems to at least be able to challenge Kirk, if not outright supersede him. And I believe there are times later where, in the event of a medical care, Bones can overrule Kirk. which I like.
Yes, well, we saw that in the previous episode where he was like, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to report you. So yeah, that makes sense.
Well, but see, I would say that's a check. That would be a check and balance. I mean, McCoy can outright disobey a direct order from Kirk if it's medically necessary.
Interesting. I mean, that
I
makes
want to
sense.
say,
Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
and
that makes
I
sense.
and I absolutely agree with that.
But I said in regards to the report, just one more note on the report, which is just that it feels a little space racist to specifically refer to him as half Vulcan. They don't refer to Pike as full human on that report. All I'm saying. It feels a tad space racist. They
Well, but
specifically
Spock.
call out his space race. I'm just saying.
Well, there. Okay, so there's. I'm actually glad you brought up space racism because there's a lot of it. In particular, the conversation that Kirk and McCoy have, which on the one hand, you're kind of like, all right, Bones at the end of the day really cares about Spock and is his friend, and
Yeah.
because he's defending him, turns out he's guilty of sin. But Bones is going to
Yeah.
bat for him. But all the logic that he and Kirk are using, because when Kirk's arguing with Mendez, he says the same thing. He's like, he's half Vulcan. He can't do it. I'm like,
Yeah. He's
to
half
suggest
Vulcan.
to suggest that a Vulcan can't tell a lie is more than a little racist.
Right? It's
Because
just under the assumption that they can't commit subterfuge. That feels a tad condescending, don't you think?
well, and gets changed around because the character Tuvok in Star Trek Voyager is sent to spy on the Maquis.
There you
So
go.
obviously Vulcans can lie. I'm guessing at this point, which Enterprise ruins this, so there's no saving this in canon. But at this point, and when they're even talking about it, it's like Kirk goes at one point, he's like, he's half human though, and McCoy goes, and he's buried it. You think he would risk the embarrassment? And I'm just like, but he does.
But he is.
Like
For
he
some
absolutely
reason.
is. Like, but
Well,
it's not because he's half human. It's just it's kind of like this. It's weird because they're both defending their friend, but
yeah.
not only are they blatantly wrong because Spock is in fact doing all these things, but the justification isn't that I know him, I've served with him, I trust him. It's he's a Vulcan.
It's one of those episodes where a lot of illogical shit has to happen for the conflict in the episode to happen, because you're like, at the end, Kirk is like, you should have told me, Spock, and it's like, yeah, you should have.
Yeah, you should have.
Like you, this whole lie is really on, but we'll talk about it at the end. But I mean, I just have a note that just kind of says the key to getting away with lying is to never lie, because nobody suspects Spock because he's just honest all the time. So the one time he does lie, they're not terribly suspicious of it initially.
Right. Now the one thing
but
I can say, maybe the reason Spock didn't tell Captain Kirk is because if I'm given to understand the report on Talos IV correctly, anybody who even talks about it
yeah, I
is
know it's a big
subject.
no.
Yeah, which again, we talked about this in the pilot. Why exactly?
Yeah,
We don't really
that
get
feels
it.
extreme, but
It's like
yeah,
Kronos, the Klingon homeworld. Yeah, I can see going there.
right?
Being
What about Vulcan?
although they'll probably kill you.
Yeah,
On Kronos, but
no,
I
not
could
Vulcan.
see, yeah,
What's the
Kronos or
that's
Cardassia
the
Prime or
what's the one with the not the Vulcans, the
the
bat
Romulans.
Klingons.
Yeah, Kronos.
Not Cronus is Klingons. Okay,
Yep.
like I don't know the planets well enough.
Yeah, Kronos is the Klingon home, but anywhere in the Klingon Empire, really. I mean,
Yeah.
that. But Talos 4 just seems like a really random thing for it to be
Yeah,
the only thing that will get you the death penalty. What
you don't
exactly
want
are
to.
you afraid of?
You don't
Base
want
porn?
to. I was gonna say something mean. You don't want to go have endless sex with a woman who's pretending to be hot.
Well, that's just Vegas.
Just what I'm saying. It doesn't seem like a bad time.
It's just space Vegas.
I will say I did pay a bit more attention to the pilot part. So at the end when he's like, "You guys suck too much to appreciate good endless loving," I was like, "Oh yeah, okay."
So that's they changed something in there.
There's some scenes in there that I didn't recognize, but we'll get there.
Other fun note, this is okay, so this is where the Trekkies will get mad, and I'm just gonna reiterate. We are going in air date order, not episodic order, because in terms of air date, this is the first time we see a shuttlecraft. This is not the first chronological episode where we see a shuttlecraft, but this is the first one we see in terms of air date,
Interesting.
which makes the plot of The Naked Time completely obsolete because look, shuttlecrafts exist.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
And once you know it, the Enterprise has a hangar where this shuttlecraft can land. And
They didn't
presumably
know.
they have other shuttlecraft, that's just ugh. Yeah, so there's quite a bit of like space reverse racism in this
A
episode
little
because
bit.
everybody's like,
Just a little bit.
Spock can't lie. He could never do such a thing because he's a Vulcan. And it's just kind of like, not only is that demonstrably not true in this series, no less,
It's not the
because
same.
Spock lies all the time.
Spock is a three-dimensional person. He is very capable of lying.
Extreme and good at it.
I mean, debatably good at it, but although to be fair, he at a certain point just kind of goes, "Yeah, I give up." They don't really catch him so much as he just flat out confesses everything.
That was part of his plan, though.
I know, but I'm saying if you want to argue, you could say that the subterfuge was effective because he immediately surrenders and gives up. He doesn't try to continue it.
Yeah, which that's the only thing I kind of take issue with in the script because it becomes very clear that Spock always intended to get caught and get court-martialed.
Yeah.
But they make it sound like he was sort of debating. I guess he wanted to. I guess you could make the case that he wanted to make sure that there was no way that they could like apprehend him and take him back to the starbase. So we had to wait till the shuttle was out of fuel.
I think so. Yeah, I think he
I
had
think
to get a certain. I think he says that at one point. One of the lines is that I had to get a certain distance away so that we would be too close to.
Yeah, I think he
Yeah.
does explain that. But what I'm saying is that as it's playing out on screen, it gives you the impression, at least initially, that Spock wasn't anticipating being followed, even though that's really silly because as soon as
Yeah.
the Enterprise leaves, Kirk's going to be like, the fuck?
Right.
The other thing
I
is
noticed.
everybody knows he's lying because he has all these voice recordings, and you exist in a time where video conferencing is a thing.
That is okay. It is, but also they okay. No, we're gonna get there. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, it does exist. Oh no, yeah, you're right because they did the on-screen thing in the previous. Yeah.
They did the on-screen thing in the pilot.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, right. Because they talked to the Talosians or whatever. Yeah.
In each of the pilots, in fact. So it is a thing that can happen.
He's just like, trust me, bro. The captain's on my side. See?
Yeah, no, it's such a and it's written on like I don't know if DeForest Kelly made that face on purpose to like show that he's like, this is bullshit. I'm not buying this.
My favorite bit is where have we hit the point where he confesses yet? Are we there?
Not yet.
Okay. Because I have some notes about DeForest Kelly in the scene where he confesses.
Well, we'll get there, but first, guess what time it is?
Spur time.
No, it's time for advertising.
As far back as I can remember, I have wanted to be an entrepreneur. Now, I am here to guide you through the intricate paths of building your business, embracing emerging technologies and navigating the startup world. I am Saul Tarazona, and this is Startup Corps, your go-to podcast for entrepreneurial insights and tech-driven success.
And we're back. Spock has Kirk and Mendez brought aboard and gives himself up, confessing to mutiny. The crew is unable to change the current course of the Enterprise, however, which is still heading towards Talos IV. Mendez convenes a hearing at which Spock requests immediate court-martial, which requires 3 command officers to oversee. Kirk objects that only he and Mendez are available, but Spock notes that Pike is still listed on the active duty roster. The tribunal begins, and Spock offers his testimony, what seems to be video footage of the Enterprise's earlier visit to Talos IV in the year 2254. So the one thing that I love, because I did a bit of an eye roll, and I always do a bit of an eye roll because they still do this in TV to this day, is they present like security or phone footage as clearly
I know it's
filmed.
a big pet peeve of mine. I know. I saw that in a podcast, other podcasts I listened to. They point out the same thing. Yeah, when you got HD footage on a security camera, and you're like, the fuck?
And perfect camera angles and editing.
But
that's the big
thing. For me, it's so much more distracting when they attempt to lampshade it. Like that's infinitely more distracting. So when Kirk goes, "How do you have footage that looks this good? It's impossible." I have a note that says they're never going to reveal how Spock got this footage, are they?
They do, though.
And they don't. Do they?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Maybe I missed how they do it. How he did.
So it's being sent by the Talosians.
Oh, okay.
which
I
I
must
which
have
I
completely missed that.
which I actually really appreciate because I was like, huh, in 1966 they had the foresight,
Wherewithal.
yeah, to know that people are going to be like, hey, that's awful nice for, even though in Star Trek is probably the only show you could get away with it because so many times like how the view screen works makes no sense. How do you get a camera in some of the places that the view screen sees?
That's
It just
right.
doesn't.
I
So
didn't
it's
need an explanation.
plausible.
I'm like, it's Star Trek. It's science
But
fiction. They have video cameras.
But I liked it though because at one point they're accusing Spock of faking it because they're like, these aren't log tapes. This is too good of footage.
Yeah, you're right. My thing is though, in the 1960s, what makes it funny to me is lampshading like that exists because of people like us today. Like, look, that's why lampshading, like, that's why movies go out of their way. That's why like movies like the Beauty and the Beast remake exist purely to answer questions nobody asked. Like that's why that kind of lampshading exists. It didn't exist in the 1960s. No one in 1965 would have been like, how do they have such good security camera? They would have just been like, it's future shit.
Well,
So
no, they're
like
just
that
like
extra
they're literally just like, I'm watching a thing in my living room.
right? Yeah, yeah,
We're
exactly. It
not
takes place in
concerned.
space.
We're
We
not
just went
concerned with
there.
we're not concerned with the how yet.
Wait, no. Had they gone to space at that point?
No, I think that was later. I think that was 67. Hang on, I'm
So
gonna
yeah,
look this
they're
up.
like, we haven't even been to space yet. It's not novel to us.
Oh no, we'd been to space. Yeah, I don't think we'd done the moon landing yet.
Oh, we hadn't done the moon landing, but we had been to space.
We'd been
Okay,
to
okay, fair
space.
enough. You would know. That's
Yeah,
your
no,
country, not mine.
3 years. The show debuted 3 years before the moon landings.
Yeah,
Moon
yeah. So they hadn't
landings
even
took
really been
place.
to
Yeah.
space.
No, I think John Glenn had been up there.
I wouldn't. I know like the one that Tom Hanks was in, and I know that we have a big arm up there, and that's all I really know about space.
First man in space.
Funny because
You
there's
know,
like 12 other ones. You never really think about them, other than the one that landed.
well, that I mean that's
Oh, that's
that's the
true.
big
Apollo
one.
11.
So Yuri Gagarin had traveled first human to travel to space in 1961.
Oh,
Um,
right,
but he was the Russian. So
right.
John
Wait, the
Glenn.
Russians got to space first?
Uh, in orbit, yes,
Oh shit!
or maybe
I
not
did
even
not know that.
orbit, just into space.
I did not know that. I always thought you guys got there first. I guess that's how
No,
effective your propaganda is.
we landed on the United States landed on the moon first. Um,
Ah, you guys won the space race, the whole thing.
I mean, overall, yeah, but the Soviets were first. In fact, this is a nice little Easter egg for you. Way, way, way back in the late 50s. You're familiar with Astro Boy, I assume.
Astro Boy, the superhero.
The Japanese manga and anime, yeah.
Yeah.
So, fun fact: if you go back and look at some older comics, Astro Boy comics, in one of them, and I can't remember which one, there's a story where Astro Boy goes to the moon, right? And Astro Boy's set in the future. He goes to the moon, and there's a flag on the moon. Guess what flag is up there?
Japan.
Soviet Union.
Oh, interesting, because they thought that the Soviet Unions were going to get there first.
And it honestly looked that way. It,
Yeah.
it looked that way. All
It really
like
did. They got all the good. I watched a video on this. They got all the good guys as far as rockets are concerned. Like they got all the.
not all of them. They got most of them.
They got most of them. Yeah, it was a miracle. I watched a really good video about the space race, and yeah, and it was like once you guys won it, everyone gave up basically, which is kind of a shame. But so going back to Spock revealing his subterfuge.
Oh, hang on. I have so the first American in space was actually
Oh,
Alan Shepard in May
okay.
of 1961. So a little behind the Russians.
So
Not super.
they had been to space. Like it was understood that you could go to space at that point.
Correct. They knew it was
I
possible.
think that's
Although
why Star Trek exists.
I mean, I would imagine. Although I gotta
Like
say,
height of the space race, the space show, it makes sense.
let's. I'm gonna put you in a frame of mind though. This Alan Shepard guy, balls of steel. This man, so the second man ever to go into space, gets launched up in a rocket, a literal ball of fire under his ass. Goes into
Yeah, I mean,
space,
yeah,
goes into space for 15 minutes, and comes back safe.
yeah. I mean,
What
when
the
they did
hell?
that there's no they went up there with the understanding they hoped that they'd come back, but they didn't assume that they would.
And then imagine the guys that landed on the moon.
That is a thing that blows my mind. Like just the concept of being in space like that.
That is so
I don't want to
wild
pay
to
a
me.
billionaire to do it though. I don't know why. I don't want to pay a billionaire to take me into space. It feels unsafe. I mean, they couldn't even be brought to the Titanic. Oh, oh, the
To be
Titan
fair,
joke for y'all.
to beware, they were warned. To be fair, not where. Although to beware,
Beware.
to beware and fair, they were warned
They were. They were. That is a
repeatedly.
fascinating story. But anyway,
It's
back
just
to Star
sad.
Trek.
It's just sad.
Oh, it's very sad. The saddest one was the kid who didn't want to go on it. Sad story. The look on Bones' face when Spock reveals his subterfuge, his look of like, fuck, I don't know what to do here.
It's literally
I,
like,
I
I stood up for you, you dick.
yeah. And my favorite part of it was like, do I banish you to quarters? What do I do here? I don't know what to do here, Spock. Tell me what to do here.
In my head, the wheels are
You
cranking.
can
He's
see
like,
it happening in his face. Yeah, it's
he's like,
great.
wait, does that mean I'm in command? I don't want to be in command. I'm a doctor, not a
Yeah.
captain.
Right. It's like the acting. It's just that like you could see him thinking. Like we constantly praise DeForest Kelly, but that was just such a good.
I praise
such a good
DeForest
moment.
Kelly. I praise DeForest Kelly because it seems like on every one of these scenes, he has a fundamental understanding of what's going on in Dr. McCoy's head
Right.
and
It's such a good,
communicates it.
and it's the same thing with Spock, but it's different. But just in that moment of him just being like, you could see him being like, "I've never been here before. I don't know how to deal with this." Kirk, like you could just see he wants to call Kirk, like
Jim, if he needs his
Jim, I need your help.
if he needs his spleen out, I'm your man. If it comes to captaining a ship, I would love to have seen that, even if it was just a gag of McCoy being placed in temporary command of the Enterprise and just being like, whoa,
I'm a doctor, not a captain, man.
what do I do?
Opinion for you: would you prefer Law and Order Spock VU or Law and Order Trek VU?
Trek VU.
Trek, because Spock VU requires context, right? I think that's
Spock needs a foil to be interesting.
Fair. Because I was like, it's like Law and Order. Dun, dun.
I'm immediately picturing Spock and McCoy in the role of like Ice-T and what's his name? Munch. The character name is Munch.
Munch.
Yeah.
I could see that.
I am seeing them just take those two and swap them out with Spock and McCoy as partners. Oh,
See, I was gonna be like Kirk. Who's Kirk? Is Kirk?
Kirk is obviously Stapler.
I was gonna say Stabler, but then I was like, but he hasn't committed nearly enough crimes. He hasn't made you go. Is he allowed to get away with that nearly enough yet?
I would say
he hasn't done anything nearly questionable enough as far as I'm concerned.
The J.J. Abrams Kirk has.
That is true. He's on the edge as much as Stabler is. See, Stabler for a guy who's thinking about this is the fact that his name is Stabler. Is that supposed to be ironic because he's not very stable? Is that a misnomer?
But what's Olivia's last name?
Benson.
Okay. Yeah. Well, okay.
It's too. I guess that's too clever for Dick Wolf.
Hey, now.
My guy loves my favorite part about Law and Order SVU is you can tell the point when like people start to not like cops because they started to like be really like soft spoken. Like early season Stabler would do borderline illegal shit to perps, and you're like, there's a point where cops stopped being allowed to do that on television, and you can tell because that show's been on the air for so long. Very funny.
They do at least allude to the fact that he's gotten in trouble for his temper. Yeah. So I mean,
also like there's an episode where like the FBI guy helps him like torture information out of a guy, and it's like this must have been he's early 2000s when that was okay.
He's like, stand aside, rookie.
Right? I know how to properly torture people.
Let me show you how we do this internationally. So in the original script, McCoy and Scotty have a scene where they explain to Kirk how they figured out the computer bank Spock tampered with to lock the ship on course. They took perspiration readings on all the computer banks, and since Spock's sweat has copper in it, traces of copper were found. The scene wasn't shown, but that is essentially the catching Spock green-handed, as it were, which I found particularly funny because I was right. At one point, I forget which episode, it's the one where Spock has red blood on his green cut. And I said, I don't know why they even went to the trouble of having Vulcan's blood be green because it doesn't really make sense. But I was like, I don't know, maybe there's copper in their blood or something as just kind of like an aside. And I'm like, Jesus, I was right.
Yeah, you're definitely right. I didn't pick up on that.
And then here we come to the fast forward part of the episode. Spock presents his evidence. On the screen, the Enterprise arrives, Captain Pike's Enterprise arrives at Talos IV in the year 2254, using footage from the original pilot, The Cage. Here's the wild part to me, and I had to remind myself of this. You and I have the benefit of having seen the pilot.
I did have to remind myself of that, but also that in of itself led me to a criticism of like, I was like, on the one hand, part of me kind of wishes I had watched this having not seen that, because it definitely impacted my ability to not enjoy this, but like certainly like, yes, I was very bored during the parts I had seen 5 weeks ago. You know what I mean? Like, it's not far enough removed for me to like not be like, oh my God, this feels tedious. But that having been said, I did pick up on more stuff this time. It was nice because there was like lots of stuff about that first episode that I now like picked up again on like a rewatch, for lack of a better word. But yeah, it was very. I said, "Thank God that pilot looked dull." It's just a note I have.
Well, the funny thing is, a lot of people their first impression might be that the reason parts of the episode were cut around is because to save time. Actually, the biggest reason for why some of the scenes were cut out of the pilot and into obviously they were editing for time, a lot of that footage was lost, for presumed destroyed for
Interesting.
years. In fact, I think it wasn't until the 80s that they found the complete original film reels for it. Gene Roddenberry owned a 16 millimeter black and white reel of it that he had personally. But as far as the original 35 millimeter color reel, in its entirety, I don't think they had that. It was eventually returned to Paramount so they could,
Oh. So
release it.
that's why they had to they didn't just use this episode whole cloth, and although it's the pilot, I guess they wouldn't. But I guess that's why it's edited the way it is.
Partially at
Um,
least. But I have to remind myself too, and I had to put myself in the headspace of someone who was watching the show for the first time. This would have been a wild episode. This looked like it was basically a miniature movie because it was 2 episodes that were shot as
but
far as
my
they were
thing is,
concerned.
my thing with that pilot footage, the first thing I was like, if I hadn't already seen this, my thoughts would be this feels like it's a completely different show, and I'm losing all the shit I like about Star Trek. I'm just like, this is so fucking boring. It's so boring.
What I don't understand is that because I had seen both before. When I rewatched the pilot, I wasn't bored when I watched it. When I was watching this, I was bored as hell.
I was so bored because it's lacking all the color, all the personality. I will say that I did notice this time how that doctor character is what became Bones because it's effectively the same character.
I thought it was
Um,
strange that they included that scene in this sort of testimony because it's not really Pike's command fatigue is not really relevant in the context of this. It is very much in the pilot. It's
I
not
think
relevant at all in
I think
this episode.
that scene maybe serves because they initially ignore it, right? I think that scene serves to explain why they end up not ignoring it.
I don't know. I just
Maybe.
mean in the context of the menagerie, it's not necessary because Pike being, Pike's command fatigue is also very out of character for him in the context of the menagerie episode because he's now this decorated, very well
Yeah.
respected leader, and it just doesn't really serve any purpose in the
Other
context
than
of
to
the
make the
menagerie.
episode longer.
That's it. It's filler. It's time filler. But yeah, sometimes they break the story up at very odd times, and I'm guessing that those are scenes that they didn't have.
I'm getting my thing with a lot of these pilot shots though is, well, now that I know the explanation for where the footage comes from, I completely missed that. But for most of it, I just kept going, how did you know about the parts you weren't there for?
Well, the Talosians did.
The
Um,
televisions did, yeah.
but that's another thing. So if this footage is coming from Talos 4, it would make sense that they might know about things that happened on the bridge per se. But again, the conversation. Well, I guess they read Pike's mind though, so they
I
would know it.
suppose
Never
they
mind.
read Pike's mind, yeah.
Fun fact though, Malachi Thorne, who plays Commodore Jose Mendez in this episode, also provided the original voice of the Keeper in the original pilot of The Cage.
Oh, interesting. So that okay, because that was my question was there's a shot at the end of him talking that the footage has just clearly been ripped from the original pilot. But I'm like, but it's original dialogue and it sounds just like him.
Well, it gets better. So you and I have actually not seen the pilot as it was intended, and nobody who didn't see it Nobody will have, unless you saw the original broadcast of the Menagerie. No, I'm sorry. I take that back. The original pilot. So I'll just read the note. It'll make sense, and I'll stop rambling. Since Throne, I said Malachi Throne, right? I think I said Thorn. Malachi Throne. Since Throne played a second role in the Menagerie as the Commodore, the Keeper's voice was electronically processed to sound higher pitched.
If the form and the color is not appealing, it can appear as any food you wish to visualize.
If the form and the color is not appealing, it can appear as any food you wish to visualize.
This modified voice would replace Malachi Throne's original voice work in the remastered and new original versions of The Cage that were released later, as well as this episode.
Interesting. So it's
And
not
that-
what the character originally sounded like?
No, it originally was just Throne's voice, but in the
Huh.
Menagerie, they did the vocal effects so that he could record new dialogue and it would sound the same. So that dialogue you're talking about in the end, that's why they did that.
And so then retroactively they went and they did that with that original pilot. To make
So that it
to
wasn't-
make it consistent.
Yeah, so it wasn't going to sound like the Commodore.
But that's so interesting because that I appreciate that because I know this character from that episode, but had you not, that wouldn't, I guess because they're expecting this is that pilot, that it's a bonus thing, I guess maybe, that they're like, oh, people are going to go back and they're not going to experience it. They're going to experience it as more of an addendum, I guess maybe is how I would put it.
Well, it was never intended to be released for mass consumption, although I'm pretty sure that Roddenberry wanted it to be, obviously because it was later in 1980, if I remember correctly.
I will say I probably would have enjoyed it more. I like watching it the way we are because it's just easier on my Paramount Plus account.
Right.
But in terms of like context, it would have been, Jordan said a similar thing of the Terrifier movies, where it would have been more, probably would have made this a better experience, a more interesting experience had I watched this first and that second, because that would have provided context to this.
And fair enough. Yeah,
but
I can't
it's also
really...
still incredible. My note would have still been, this pilot footage is incredibly dull. It looks dull. All of the actors have like no spirit. I don't know what they're going for, but they are like, again, cannot reiterate enough. I understand why I didn't make it a series.
Well, and not only that, so at this point, we got to remember, like what I said, when you start with the pilot, it's not super underwhelming because if you've never seen Star Trek before, you don't really have anything to compare it to. Once you've seen episodes like The Man Trap and The Naked Time and Mud's Women, and you see these much more dynamic and colorful characters, this pilot is gray. It's just so dull.
Like all of the costumes are dull looking. Like it, and to be fair, it looks like some of them have been punched up a little bit, like with like lighting or recoloring or something. Like they look a little brighter than they did when in the pilot when we watched it, but it still looks like it's. I want to say bad. Bad feels mean, but it just doesn't. It's
I know what you mean.
Yeah, because like if I were watching this on TV, I'd be like, "Where's my Captain Kirk?" And I turn this off.
It's funny because my parents, particularly my father, when he was like, he described when Next Generation came about, they were both, and independently of one another, mind you, they were both like, no, we want our Star Trek. Yeah. Lo and behold, Next Generation will become probably, I would say, the most beloved of the Star Trek series, but
depending on who you talk to,
not by me. I mean, as in the general sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to say. And in terms of the zeitgeist, maybe?
I mean, the zeitgeist.
Kirk is so well known. Everyone can do it. Everyone has a Shatner impression they pull out at a party.
Especially Shatner.
Yeah, especially Shatner.
I'm Captain Kirk!
I'm Captain Kirk. It's still funny.
This is going to have zero context for the viewers. When we were recording the audiobook, you unintentionally had me dying because when you were doing the, was it a computer voice? I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, it was supposed to be a computer.
Yeah, and you just lapsed into the Thermian?
I don't know that I was intentionally doing. I
don't think you were. That's just what I was getting. I was just getting like, we need you.
Oh, there was a point where I was trying to say Virus was giving me shit for how I said doctor. And Jordan pointed out, you don't watch Doctor Who, so you're not going to appreciate this. He pointed out that it's because of Doctor Who, there's a thing in it called a Dalek, and that's how it pronounces doctor. Like, that's just how they pronounces it. It's like, that's why you're doing that. And I'm like, oh my God, that's why. It blew my mind. I was like, the thing about when someone points or asks you not to do something that you're doing subconsciously, it's then all you can do.
Because ironically, you're trying not to do it. It's kind of like when I was given direction because we've established when I voice my doctor, I almost said his name, but when I voice the doctor character that I play, I'm just like, oh, I'm just going Hugh Grant, especially based on the scene. And then
Usually,
he's
if I am doing a voice, that's how I get there. I'm like, I do an actor, and that's why I said that because I'm like, that's what that voice makes me think of. Like I heard how someone said once that everyone has a Christopher Walken impression. Every guy on the planet could just bust out a Christopher Walken impression, and I'm like,
it's
"Oh,
just
she's so great."
it's just a very distinct way of speaking. So
Right?
yeah, just about everybody. God, one of these days. Now I just want to read Star Trek lines as Christopher Walken.
There's,
What? Factor
look,
two.
there's something on the wing. That's not Star Trek.
Close enough.
I'm
I'm Captain
Captain.
Kirk.
I'm Captain Kirk.
It's
Mr.
me,
Spock. Punch it to warp factor 5.
Captain
Oh,
Kirk.
it's normally better than that.
And nothing's worse than Christopher Walken singing in the live action Jungle Book. I'm sorry. I said it.
I will never forget that. We watched that movie in theaters, and I will never forget the
too.
first time I saw that.
I laughed out loud.
I laughed so hard. I nearly cried. It was.
I did one of these. I went.
Do want to be like you.
You.
I want to walk like you, talk like you. It's you. You see, it's true. Sorry.
You know what?
He's such an easy person to impersonate. He's just so much fun.
Back in 2267, the scene is interrupted by a message from Starfleet Command, which reveals that the images they have been viewing are being transmitted directly from Talos IV. Mendez is placed in command of the Enterprise, and Kirk is. They kind of allude to the fact that Kirk's in trouble, but I think under the circumstances, it seems very arbitrary because it's like he's in trouble because his ship received transmissions from Talos IV, even though he gave no order, had no knowledge of it, but because he's the captain.
In the moment, it seems like an extreme reaction just to be like, and we're going to publicly execute you for this, but like obviously retroactively, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the reason for that. But like, if it were actually Starfleet, you'd be like, this feels like a disproportionate reaction.
Yeah, this feels Klingon-y.
It does a tad bit, yeah.
Spock begs Kirk to see the rest of the transmission, which I do find it kind of clever. Where Spock is like, "Are you asking why?" And because of the rules of the Federation, he is now allowed to present any evidence that he has. And I'm just like, "You got played, son." Like,
right?
But you're in a court martial.
Bureaucracy.
Well, but you're in a court martial. Of course, Spock can present evidence. You don't have to ask why. That's why you're there,
right? He's there to make his case as to why he shouldn't be put to death, apparently.
That is the point of said court martial. Now it's time for an ad break.
Come with me to discover the transformative power of kindness and the joy it brings. Join me as we explore every Monday morning simple yet profound ways to elevate your happiness, one gesture at a time.
Wow, fantastic baby, dance. I'm gonna dance. Fantastic baby.
Wow, I loved that ad. I will buy or subscribe to what was advertised. Spock's trial continues, and the transmitted scene resumes very punctually, I might add. It just starts right back up again.
Right, just right back up.
Yeah, with Pike in 2254 in the cell with the transparent wall, where we see most of the pilot episode play out as it did before. And you'll notice I'm skipping over this because if you want to go over what happened in the pilot, you can check out our first episode, "Sexy Green Pilots in Outer Space."
Yeah, it's really funny because like you mentioned the green slaves, and I guess just like because that episode I was really I was just doing things the way I do. I guess my brain just completely glossed over that part because this time I was like, oh, that's what he was talking. That's the green. There's the green ladies, which incidentally, Kirk being to some green ladies. I didn't make a note of that, but he made when they showed up and they were like, everyone is hypnotically attracted to the green alien ladies. Kirk was like, yes, they are.
Kirk's there and he's just like Fogel and super bad.
I got a boner.
So again, we see footage from the pilot, which again I'm seriously, and it might be named this. I was for some reason whenever I was thinking about us recording this episode, I keep coming back to the phrase "Haven't we been here before?" I'm seriously thinking that that's going to be the title of this episode. So obviously, if it's not, for all of you watching it, if it's not, then we came up with a better idea. But that just feels right here.
It really might like a big thing beyond the fact that this easily could have been one part.
It really could have.
It involves Spock like being utterly devoted to this man that he's willing to risk everything that we, in terms of the audience, theoretically have never met before.
That's a hard pill. See, it's ironic because if you've seen the pilot, it actually makes more sense to you.
A little bit, but him and because Spock is such a different character, even as he's being presented in that footage in this episode. They don't really, nothing in that pilot footage would give you the impression that he's willing to like blow up his career over this.
In fact, quite the opposite.
Right.
Yeah.
He's just a science officer. Like why do like there's no justification really for it.
Yeah,
like,
we're used to Spock being like, yeah, we should totally maroon that guy on an abandoned planet. We could absolutely do
much.
that. Or
He's
you know what? We probably need to leave those dudes down to freeze to death on that planet. That's a thing we should totally do.
Right.
But
also,
Spock does like ass. We established that in the previous episode.
That is true. He does love firm hindquarters.
An enigma is Spock. Pointy ears and shapely rears, as they said in The Big Bang Theory.
Yep. My guy likes he likes a good bottom.
It's only logical.
Well,
it is the Maximus muscle. No, I was annoyed by the fact they're still obsessed with the damn blue leaves. They're just leaves, guys.
They're just leaves.
They're just leaves. Like,
I mean, they're just leaves. It's just a bag floating in the wind, guys. Come on, any idea how complicated your circulatory system is? Family Guy reference for you all.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. I got it. I understood that reference.
They're just blue leaves. I understood that reference. They're just blue leaves, guys. That's it. That's all.
Chlorophyll, more like borophyll.
Also, this is gonna be my opportunity to make fun of all this stuff that happened. Those landing party outfits, they're still stupid looking.
They're still bad. Maybe it was chilly down there.
Maybe. My thing is how they have these consistent uniforms with the little fringe of their colors, so you can still identify them, but they still look bad. Like I get why they ditched these.
Well, it just really kind of doesn't make that much sense. Like if they're made out of Kevlar, sure, but I don't think they're made out of Kevlar.
I don't really know. I mean, maybe it's a tactical thing, maybe because they do kind of have a tactical vibe to them. I honestly don't know.
And you know what? There might be something to that because there's a in Star Trek Enterprise, I believe it's either season 3 or 4. The Enterprise incorporates a crew of Marines that are just straight up military. So maybe. And the reason they did that, and initially the Enterprise goes out without very much weaponry at all, but as they encounter more threats, naming the Klingons and the Xindi, if I remember correctly, they get a complete retrofit, and the Enterprise essentially becomes a warship at that point. And part of that is they now have, like soldiers, like legit soldiers on board, not combat trained people. I mean soldiers. So as the years go by, as Starfleet evolves, there's probably just more tactical gear integrated into just general use, I would think.
Maybe. I mean, that's how I'm going to choose to believe it, because otherwise they're just dumb looking outfits.
Right. So maybe that's just a last vestige. Yeah, maybe that's just the last vestige of the Space Marines. I don't know.
Maybe.
Back in the year 2266, after we watched the pilot rerun that wasn't actually a rerun. But it was for us and for you.
Feels like a rerun. Feels like a
rerun to us. The transmission ends as the Enterprise arrives at Talos IV. Commodore Mendez suddenly fades away, and the Keeper appears on the viewing screen. For those of you who haven't put it together yet, the Keeper is the one with the big head, the big-headed alien.
Captain Bighead.
Yes, he was affectionately
Also,
named.
I believe we are at this point well deep into the second episode. Like, we didn't even
Yes.
mention the fact that we finished the episode like the first episode like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. They just run together. So this was definitely filler. Like this
It
was made to
really
fill 2 weeks
was
of
like
television.
the first half of the first half of the first part is really good stuff, and then yeah, as soon as I was like, oh, this isn't as like when you were like, oh, we're not gonna have much to say. I was like, what do you mean? And then the pilot kicked in, and I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I see exactly what he means. Anyway,
The keeper appears on the viewing screen, informing Kirk that Mendez's presence was an illusion. The court martial was a ploy to buy time to bring Pike back to Talos IV, where, if willing, he would be able to enjoy the illusion of a normal life. A message from Commodore Mendez, the real one, then advises that Starfleet has waived the prohibition against contact with the planet for this one occasion, and that Kirk is free to proceed as he thinks best. Pike is transported to the planet, and the rejuvenated Pike and Vina are seen on the viewing screen returning with the Telosians to the underground complex. The Keeper appears one last time to wish Kirk well. This is the one time, well, it's not the one time, this is one of the times where if you've seen the pilot before, this scene is completely ruined for you because, admittedly, through some very clever editing, the ending of the original pilot is changed as far as Captain Kirk is concerned because in the original pilot, the Keeper tells Pike that he will return Vina's illusion of beauty and more, showing that they've also created an illusion of Pike who will serve as a companion for her in her, dream illusion thing. But when we see the images that we see on the screen, only show the Keeper giving back Vina her illusion of beauty. They don't show Pike, and the reason they do that is because they take that shot of the Pike illusion and Vina going back underground, showing that as Pike, which makes no sense because Pike has only just now left the room, and as heavy as that damn chair is, Spock's probably at least a few minutes away from the transporter room, but this is somewhat instantaneous.
interesting.
But again, if you had never seen the pilot before, you're just like, oh, cool. Except the fact that it's not actually Pike, though; it's just an illusion in his own mind.
Yeah,
You know.
my thing was like, so they're like, oh no, you can't come have endless holographic sex with the the girl who's pretending she's hot. Ooh, that's so mean. You can only do it if you're an invalid. That seems to be the lesson here. You can't do it.
So though, again, they finally listened to me though. I don't. It makes no sense that Talos IV is quarantined because here's the thing: if you have somebody that's completely disabled like Captain Pike, okay, they're trying to repopulate a planet. Yes.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
So just because somebody's disabled doesn't mean they can't reproduce, especially with help in the 23rd century.
Like, especially if you've got magic reality warping powers, that makes them not a cripple.
Well, I mean, even so, like, obviously they can't make
Invalid.
Pike not disabled.
Cripple
They can't.
probably offensive.
That's the 60s. But my point being is, okay, so they want to, and it's kind of implied that Pike isn't that much older than Kirk. Like he's
No.
older, obviously, but they kind of make it where they make it seem that Kirk, while he respects Pike, they're essentially peers in a way.
Yeah.
Like Pike is obviously.
It's not like what it is in the Chris Pine movie where he's very definitely older than him and like.
Correct. Well, for one thing, Pike is still a captain. He's still the rank of captain.
That those movies imply that Pike is way more of a character than the show than he is, at least as far as the show is concerned.
Compared to this, yeah, but again, with Strange New Worlds being a thing, because Pike is very much the star of that show.
True.
Even though Kirk is there in the later seasons, Pike is still very much he's the captain of Strange New Worlds. But I appreciated the editing because as an editor myself, I can just imagine the glee on his face being like, "I'm fooling all you people."
Well, you're right. I guess there was an element of me being like, yeah, that's clearly just footage from the pilot. But I said the same thing about the Telosians at the end, where it's like that's just footage from the pilot. They've reconstituted to change the ending.
Yeah, but fun fact. So this is vitally important. How editing is vitally important. I wonder, Justin, have you seen a film called Kingdom of Heaven?
I am familiar with that's. I feel like that's a Jesus. They're not a Jesus movie, but it's about the Crusades, right?
Yeah, Jerusalem.
Yeah,
the city.
I am familiar with it. I don't think I've ever seen it.
Okay, here's the funny thing. So
I've seen clips from it, but
when it came out, I liked it. It was by no means my favorite movie of all time, but I liked it. And then just through sheer happenstance, I got a hankering to watch it, and I saw that it was for sale on DVD, but I saw it was the director's cut, and I'm like, I'm a movie nerd. I'd like to see the behind the scenes crap. And director's cuts are usually fun. What I didn't realize is that the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven, first of all, is almost 4 hours long, and I don't mean in a bad way. I love it. It's great. The reason it's almost 4 hours long is you understand how much that movie was edited down for the theatrical
Yeah.
release. Dude, there are scenes that are in both movies, but because of how it is edited differently, have completely different context. Like there's a scene where one of the villains, Reynald de Chatillon, is in prison and he's talking to the other villain, Guy de Lusignan. And in both movies, spoiler alert, but the movie came out in what, 2007 or so? Anyway, it's been out for a minute, maybe 2008. But anyway, in both movies, there's a plot where they try to assassinate Bailey and the lead character. But what you don't know, they eliminate an entire character between the director's
Really?
cut and the theatrical cut. Now, this
That's
character
impressive.
is mentioned in the theatrical cut, but you don't see him. It's Sibylla's son, who is the heir to the
Huh.
throne of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Now, in
Yeah.
the director's cut, they go, and again, in both movies, they establish that King Baldwin is a leper, and he eventually dies. His nephew, so his sister's son, in the director's cut, also gets diagnosed with leprosy. And there's an entire subplot about Sibylla mercy killing her son, but in doing so, Guy de Lusignan takes the crown of Jerusalem.
Huh.
And in this scene, Reynald de Chatillon asks Guy, "The boy is in heaven?" as a question. In the theatrical cut, they make it seem like he's talking about Balian. He's actually talking about the queen's
Oh,
son.
interesting.
And
Interesting.
that's only a little bit, man. The director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven is one of my favorite movies of all time. The theatrical cut is okay.
Interesting. I can't. I'm drawing a blank right now, but that's happened to me before. I generally don't like director's cuts, but occasionally there's a
Occasionally, because like I abhor the Steiner cut. I know I said it.
I'm not a fan of Snyder cut. I watched the Are you a fan of the Halloween movies?
Yes, some of them. Some
Some
of
of them.
them. It depends.
I watched all of them last week, all 13. But the Rob Zombie cut, Rob Zombie remake,
Of the first one or the second one?
first one.
First one's quite good.
I
Um,
like the first one.
the first one of
I
his is
enjoy
good.
how it goes into Michael Myers' psychology and all that stuff. But have you seen the director's cut?
I don't think so.
Don't watch the director's cut because this is a PG show, so we're gonna keep it PG. But how Michael Myers escaped is a completely different scene in both versions. So if you've seen the theatrical cut, it's during a prison transfer. He escapes during a prison transfer, and so there's a line in the director's cut. How do I do this PG way? He escapes while a guard and his cousin victimize a woman in a really graphic
Okay,
way.
yeah, I have not seen the director's cut. Yeah, and I get the sense the reason I don't care for the second one is to me it seems like after the first one was a huge success, they kind of gave him more free reign in the editing and writers room, and I found the second one to just be a bit gratuitous.
Little bit. But the thing with that scene is there's a line later on in the movie where Loomis is giving, which I'm sure you remember, where Loomis is giving the warden shit for letting Michael escape by being, and the warden's like, "How dare you imply that my security is so bad? You think my security is so bad?" And it's like in the theatrical cut, it's like 5 guys who are transferring him to another prison. So it's like it's believable that like okay, yeah, you'd be a little shocked that he managed to get away. Whereas in the theatrical cut, he kills these 2 guys while they're victimizing a woman. So it's like, yeah, your security is shit. They opened the door and left it open. So like, yeah, your security is absolute shit. This line now doesn't make any sense.
Right,
It's incoherent, and it's
Yeah.
a disgusting scene anyway. But yeah, that's why I
Yeah.
don't care for
But
director's
no,
cuts.
editing is important, kids, and those 3 examples should illustrate that. You can change the entire tone with
Oh yeah, I
a
love
single line.
trailers. Whenever I do our videos, I like to put clips from trailers and just to tell people what they're watching. When I did the Michael Myers video, I put clips from Cat in the Hat, but if it were a horror movie,
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I love shit like that. Like you're right, editing can have such an impact. It can change the entire tone of a thing.
Which I actually
Because
kind of wanted to. There's a gag I wanted to do, and I completely forgot it. But basically, it was one horror movie where Virus and I were kind of having fun with the thing. Like, if you put yakety sax over this, it turns into a comedy.
yeah, absolutely. Like there's a really great YouTube channel called I subscribe to called Editing is Everything, where they take a movie or a trailer and cut it into like a horror movie or whimsical movie or
I
like
think
a
they
family
did.
friendly movie.
I think they did one where Titanic was a horror movie.
Yeah. There's I've seen one where it's someone cut a trailer where they cut a trailer for a sequel, and it made it look coherent, and the plot looked like it was Jack. It turns out that Jack has been cryogenically frozen for since then, and they find him, and he accidentally gets unthawed, and he's running around modern day like New York, and they have to chase after him so they can use clips from Catch Me If You Can. But it's just them trying to and him yeah, it's him like reacting to like the modern day. It's the stupidest, but it was really good. It was really well edited.
That's phenomenal. Our red shirt tally is still at 2.
I mean, to be fair, our Enterprise bits were relatively drama free. This episode was relatively drama free for our main crew. I think.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, it pretty
just
much was Spock. Spock was the drama.
yeah, Spock was the drama. See, I kind of want that to be the title where it's Spock is the drama.
I don't know.
As much as I love
We'll workshop
we'll,
it.
we'll, we'll workshop it. But my only real ending note to end it on is just that the ending of this undercuts the ending of that pilot episode by being like, nah, he's good. He's good. He just had to set himself on fire.
Your life, like humans are okay with activity so long as their life sucks sufficiently.
Right. Enough that they're okay with being in captivity and living an awesome life in captivity.
Which, in actually, there of all things, there's a Batman Beyond episode that kind of plays with this idea, but with teenagers, not old people. Where what is Talos IV going to become the retirement home of the Federation?
I mean, look, they want people to experiment on. They need a place to put their invalids where they can not have to think about them and feel guilt free. That feels like a win-win for everybody.
You know what? And I just remembered Vina's line that really stuck out to me in the pilot. And you're right. This episode completely undercuts that sentiment.
A little bit, yeah.
100%. Because I was connecting the dots with the Batman Beyond episode. Is there's a villain called, I think, yeah, it's Spellbinder, and it's in a later uh, episode where he basically develops this chamber that people can plug into, and it's basically like real life virtual reality. Where
Oh
it's
yeah.
not virtual reality, as far as you're concerned, it's real. It's actually happening. You have all the
It's the Matrix.
sensations and all that. Yeah, yeah, it's the Matrix. But the thing is, he makes them pay for it. So every once in a while, he pulls them out, and then they have to go like steal shit or you know
Oh, diabolical.
it's a dark episode, but it's a really good episode.
I've always said when it comes to that, or like when they're like, "Would you be in the simulation if you knew it?" Yeah, yeah,
It
I
depends. You
probably
have to
would.
pay
Yeah,
for the simulation.
if you got to pay for it, then no, probably not because I'm poor. But like, if I didn't have to pay for it, like I pretty much be the guy in the Matrix who's eating the steak, being like, "I'll screw
What's
over
his,
Neo."
what's his name? Cipher.
Cypher, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be him. Me and Jordan pretty much agreed that we'd be him. We'd be the people being like, "Yeah, do I want to be in the Matrix where it's 1999 and my life is mostly awesome, or do I want to get unplugged and be in whatever the hell Scion is? No, thank you. I'll take the Matrix."
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people would on the surface be like, "That's easy to pass up." It's like, if you forget that you're in the Matrix, though, and you
Exactly.
get to,
Yeah.
yeah,
You plug me back in, tell me I'm not in the Matrix. I'm good. The
but
out of the
he's
Matrix
like
seems
he's like
miserable.
a in the Matrix. He's like a billionaire, and
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
that
Like
kind of
I'm like,
stuff.
do I want to go live a relatively normal life, or do I want to be sad, bald, and have the occasional mass orgy? Like, you know,
Occasional, like on special occasions
only when they celebrate. That's when they have the when they have the
with
when they
techno
have their
music though.
that movie's weird. The
I want to
movies are
see it.
weird.
I want to see a Star Trek Christmas party. That's something I want to see.
Star Trek themed Christmas party.
No, no, just like Captain Kirk when he's,
Oh, I mean,
banging.
apparently a lot happens in the science lab on
Apparently, I want to know what happens in the botany lab after hours. That's what I want to. Oh my!
Oh my.
You think he used that hand flower thing, Anybody
Of course
ever
he does.
has?
He's Spock. He's into weird stuff. Not
Well,
Spock.
not
He's
Spock.
Sulu. He's into weird stuff. I get the feeling that Sulu's into some free loving. You know what he's into to maybe some of the weird stuff. Not that I'm
And
judging that. You be into
and
the
yet,
weird stuff, man.
and yet, Mud's women had no effect on him.
No,
Or maybe he's just that freaky that he's like, what, three beautiful women? It's a
I can do
Tuesday.
4. Yeah, exactly. Typical Tuesday for Sulu.
I bet Sulu does throw some raging parties
Absolutely in the botany lab.
all over. It's just
All,
random
all over the
fencing
botany lab.
happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so I have a very important before we close, and I meant to do this last episode, but of course I forgot about it. I have a very important what did we fuck up segment, and this one's all me, buddy. I forget which episode.
Hey, you're the expert.
Well, here's the
Josh.
thing. Here's the thing, though, and I blame the internet because the internet got trolled on this one. Remember, I forget which episode it was, but we very early on discussed the concept of Mary Sue and established that Star Trek established that trend.
Oh, I think I saw that in one of the episodes. You actually put an editor's note on top of it to be like, no, that was not right. I do recall that now.
Well, I'm going to give you the full context because it turns out the author of that story did in fact coin that phrase. Her name was not Mary Sue. I put her name. That's what it was.
Yeah.
But what I didn't know is that Paula Smith did write that story, but she was not a fan. So I'm just going to share this article with all of you. Soon after, Paula Smith and Sharon Ferraro launched one of the earliest Star Trek fanzines, they started noticing a pattern to the submissions that they were receiving. Each began the same way. A young woman would board the Starship Enterprise. And, quote, because she was just so sweet and good and beautiful and cute, Smith recounts, quote, everyone would just fall all over her. Looking back, Smith says, it was obvious what was going on, quote, they were simply placeholder fantasies, and certainly I can't say I didn't have placeholder fantasies of my own. But the thing that had attracted the two friends to Star Trek was that the show, which had gone off the air for good in 1969, 4 years before they launched their zine, was intelligent. These submissions, says Smith, were not intelligent. Quote, there were very good stories coming out at the time. Adds Smith, who is now 67 at the time this article was published, which this was published in 2019.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so this is relatively new. Ad Smith, who is now 67, but there were always a huge helping of what we started calling the letters to the editor in other zines a Mary Sue story. The quote Mary Sue character, introduced in 1973 by Smith in the second issue of Menagerie, which was the name of their fan magazine, named after.
Named
Oh,
after-
this is beautiful. This
Named
is
after
not.
this episode.
This is not on purpose.
Huh.
I swear to God, this is a happy accident.
Hell of a coincidence.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Their zine was named Menagerie after the two-parter of the show's first season, articulated a particular trope that exists far beyond the Star Trek universe. Mary Sue's can be found throughout the history of literature, standing on the shoulders of earlier fill-in characters like Pollyanna, the unfailingly optimistic protagonist from Eleanor H. Porter's children's book series of the 1910s. More recently, cousins to the term can be found in the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, as coined by Nathan Rabin in his review of the Cameron Crowe film Elizabethtown, and the Jennifer Lawrence personified Cool Girl. It's no accident that all these examples are women. Smith and Ferraro also threw around terms like Murray Sue and Marty Sue when they corresponded with editors of other zines, but male fill-in characters, it seemed, could be brave and handsome and smart without reproach. Quote, characters like Superman were placeholders for the writers too, Smith points out, but those were boys. It was okay for men to have placeholder characters that were incredibly able. Women, on the other hand, were called out when their characters veered towards Icarus-level heights. It's not a surprise that the term caught on. Fans, often men, began weaponizing the Mary Sue trope to go after any capable woman represented on page or screen. Consider, for instance, the reaction to Arya Stark on the final season of Game of Thrones, which I have a. This is the author, not the zine art. I do have a bit of a pickle with that, but it's a complaint of more the episode entirely rather than Arya being the one to kill the Night King. Spoiler alert for Game of Thrones. My issue with that episode is that battle goes on far too long. Everyone should be dead.
I mean, I've only seen 6 seasons of Game of Thrones. I'm aware of the final season by reputation. That's mostly.
So I actually didn't hate the final season. I understand why people say that it felt rushed, but specifically the Battle of Winterfell, damn it, no, the Battle of Winterfell was against Ramsay Bolton. What do they call that? That's the Battle of the Bastards. No, so this would be the Battle of Winterfell.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Well, that's what it's
Ramsay
called,
Bolton
yeah.
was the Battle of the Bastards. But anyway, it's when the White Walkers attack. I almost said Rivendell. when the White
Winterfell.
Walkers attack Winterfell. Um,
Yeah.
the episode is like 55 minutes long, and through the bulk of it, the White Walkers are killing so many people so quickly that they should all be dead.
Fair enough.
Like just at
Fair
the
enough.
kill rate.
I've heard that
And
episode was bad, so that makes sense.
no, here's the thing. It's really good. It's just illogical because like the first wave of the attack, presumably all the Dothraki ride out and only a handful come back. And yet when we get to King's Landing after Daenerys destroys it, there's a shit ton of Dothraki. But you get the sense that the vast majority of them were killed at the Battle of Winterfell.
There's exactly 2 clips about season 8 of Game of Thrones that I constantly think of. It's that one clip of Amelia Clark being asked what she thinks of it, and her making that wincing face and going, "It's gonna be good." And the other one is Peter Dinklage being like, "I thought Tyrion was supposed to be smart, but
That's another one, yeah. But anyway, so they're saying is that internet commenters refuse to accept that of all the characters in George R. R. Martin's universe, she emerged as the savior of Westeros. Which I haven't read the books, but I'm given to understand a lot of their problem was the fact that that's not how it plays out in the books, if I'm not mistaken.
It's different.
Yeah, so I think it's unfair to call people misogynist for pointing out that they didn't follow the.
My one is the one that drives me crazy is when people call Rey a Mary Sue, and then it's like then you go that well it's interesting you mentioned the male Mary Sue because by the logic that people attribute to Rey, Luke Skywalker is a Murray Sue. I like that term. I'm gonna keep
No, because we see Luke Skywalker training and learning and growing and
not
screwing
in the first
up.
Movie, not in the first movie. The first movie he nails blowing up the Death Star in his first try with minimal effort.
I wouldn't call it minimal effort, but I mean it's not to the degree of Rey. But I guess I can see your point. I disagree, but I can see your point.
I'm not the person who makes that point. To me, terms like Mary Sue are essentially meaningless to me. So like it's like, is the story interesting? Then that's all I care about. It wasn't in that movie, but that's not the point.
Okay, but anyway, I'm going to continue with this because I'm reading the whole thing because I don't want to miss any context here. But when Arya killed the 19th son and slapped with the maiden, what made the situation of Game of Thrones especially frustrating was that the show already had characters that fit the mold of a Murray Sue, the forever memeable Jon Snow. Again, I don't really agree with that because Jon goes through a lot.
He dies.
I mean, literally, yeah. So I don't know that you could call him a Murray Sue. No, his aunt, isn't it? No, yeah.
It's sex with his aunt. Sorry, yeah, right.
Perhaps the most meta takedown of the incident came from Rachel Leishman, who asked, quote, "How in the world is Arya Stark a Mary Sue?" in the publication The Mary Sue, a feminist website founded in 2011, which, among other reasons, intentionally took on the name Mary Sue to reappropriate the cliche. Well, I can explain to you how Arya Stark is a Mary Sue. Okay, no, I take that back. You can't call Arya Mary Sue because you see her earn a lot. I can, however, see how people have a problem with Arya being the one to kill the Night King, but that's not a hill I'm going to die on.
No, I mean that's annoying and frustrating narratively speaking, but that doesn't make her a Mary Sue.
If anything, Daenerys is a Mary Sue, and I don't think Daenerys is a Mary Sue.
No, I don't really think any of the characters on that show I would constitute as being a Mary Sue.
No, I don't think so.
My response to when anyone ever calls a character Mary Sue is always so like.
Well, because when somebody actually is a Mary Sue, it's cheap, bad writing. But anyway, so when Smith and Ferraro founded Menagerie, the culture of the fan-made publication was a powerful force within the science fiction fan community. The fanzine had actually been born out of the sci-fi scene. The Science Correspondence Club in Chicago is credited with producing the first fan mag back in 1930.
I mean, you also got to keep in mind that like that level of fandom, we take this and fandom and acceptability it's mainstream now. It's like that's like when anyone ever makes any fun of anyone for being a nerd or being into nerd stuff. It's like, what are you living in the 1970s? Like, nerd stuff is mainstream now. Marvel comic books, video games, mainstream now, man. Like, sorry, we're part of the public. We're part of the public zeitgeist. You can get over yourselves. People like Star Trek, and they're not ashamed to admit it.
Yep.
But back then, it would have been.
Well, and later on, it was a sci-fi fan who coined the term fanzine. In the pre-internet days, these fanzines, which actually, if you early adopters of the internet remember, the term fanzine was still used in the internet space at the time, became instrumental in growing fandoms and spreading ideas like the Mary Sue across the country and even around the world. For almost 40 years, fanzines were the net, the cement which kept fandom together as an entity, says longtime sci-fi fanzine writer Don Fitch reflected in 1998. It helped too that Smith and Ferrara were already active members of the Trek community when they launched the Menagerie in 1973. Though nearly 4 decades have passed since they edited their final issue, both can still vividly recall the submission that inspired Mary Sue. The piece, which came in at 80 pages, double-sided, centered around a young protagonist who was, of course, brilliant and beautiful, and ultimately proved her mettle by sacrificing her own life to save the crew. A tragic moment, which was then upended when she resurrected herself. Quote, I'd never seen that one anywhere else, Smith says with a laugh, so I had to give the writer kudos for that. Smith, a big Mad Magazine fan, couldn't resist writing a concise, biting parody in response. Quote,
oh, interesting.
Yeah. Quote, gee golly gosh, Glorioski, it began, written from the viewpoint of the youngest lieutenant ever in the history of the Federation, a 15-and-a-half-year-old half Vulcan named Mary Sue. Immediately upon coming aboard the USS Enterprise, Mary Sue catches the eye of the debonair Captain Kirk, who confesses his love to her and propositions a bedroom rendezvous. After she turns him down, scandalized, Captain, I'm not that kind of girl. Kirk immediately walks back the suggestion. You're right, and I respect you for it, he asserts, before tapping her to watch over the ship as he fetches them coffee. Next, she encounters Mr. Spock, the Vulcan science officer, who asks why she's sitting in the captain's chair. Once she explains herself, Spock calls the decision, quote, flawlessly logical. A Trekkie's Tale, which Smith published anonymously in Menagerie number 2, concludes after Mary Sue dies her heroic death. Afterwards, Smith writes, the entire crew weeps, quote, unashamedly at the loss of her beautiful youth and youthful beauty, intelligence, capability, and all-around niceness. For good measure, the Enterprise turns her birthday into a national holiday on the ship.
Oh my. See,
oh gosh.
Leave it to the internet to miss the irony of this.
Quote, I wanted to write the complete sort of Mary Sue that there was because they were all alike, says Smith. It was just so typical that it just had to be done. While the original meaning of Mary Sue referred to a stand-in character of any gender orientation, the reason Smith and Ferraro encountered more Mary Sues than Murray Sues was that they were running Menagerie, likely had more to do with who was writing in. Unlike the larger science fiction fan base, which skewed male, both Smith and Ferraro remember that Star Trek fandom they experienced was made up of mostly women. Quote, science fiction fandom in general was like 80% men for our ballparks. Star Trek's fandom was the exact opposite, at least 75% women. And we touched on that because we're talking about, these are sexy characters, but they seem to really skew to a female audience. And Spock's character changes after that scene in The Naked Time because female fan mail increased.
Well, I mean, this is going to seem unrelated, but I promise it is. In Japan, there's a show called Kamen Rider, and the big target demographic for that show is children, because it's like a Power Ranger style thing, and middle-aged women. They just love that show. They love the drama. They love it. So you'd be surprised by where demographics tend to lie when it comes to stuff like this. You're like, yeah, you're expected to be inherently male, but no, there's some good-looking dudes being responsible, and you know what I mean, like taking care of people. So yeah, I can see why. And also, in my experience, women tend to prefer their smut written.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Yeah. Later, cultural critics began to make the argument that Mary Sue's opened up a gateway for writers, particularly women, and members of underrepresented communities to see themselves as extraordinary characters. Quote, people have said the Mary Sue characters actually seem to be a stage in writing for many people, Smith says. It's a way of exercising who they are and what they can imagine themselves doing, which is fair enough.
Yeah, yeah.
Naming the trope also allowed people to understand what they were doing when they set out to write a Mary Sue or Maurice Sue character. Quote, in terms of teaching writers a lesson, it was very useful in that people could say, well, that's really a Mary Sue story. And then they could look at it and decide whether they wanted to change it, says Ferraro. While both Smith and Ferraro actively worked to popularize the term within the Star Trek fan community, neither expected it to catch on the way it has. Quote, I was absolutely blown out of the water when I Googled it the first time and went, oh my God, says Ferraro. Smith agrees. I am surprised that it held on for so long. Many fan words get tossed around and they live for a while and then they die. But Mary Sue has withstood the test of time. Both articulate the surreal quality that comes with seeing a name they coined take on a life of its own. That includes the creeping sexism that's become associated with the term. Quote, there were the people who would say anytime there was a female protagonist, that's a Mary Sue, Smith remembers. It just developed in all sorts of ways. I think that's a touch hyperbolic, but
Not
I mean,
always.
not
but
always. No, I
sometimes.
mean just generally speaking.
Also,
She's
like anyone who like unnecessarily calls a character a Mary Sue tends to be stupid. So like they just don't know that they're not using the word correctly, at least in my experience.
and fair enough, because trust me, Mary Sue characters exist, but
Yeah. I find their statements on it though is that the original intent is that, or at least their perspective is that Mary Sue is not inherently a bad thing, but it has been ascribed to be a bad thing. But when it's used correctly, like it cannot be a bad thing. At least that seems to be their perspective. Like they didn't intend it to be a shorthand for it being a bad thing.
well, but they parodied it, so I don't really believe them when they say that.
Yeah, true. They were making
Yeah.
fun of it.
But I mean, a lot of people call like Paul from Dune a Mary Sue, and I'm like, no, because granted, I will give you this. This is why they don't have much of a leg to stand on, but they do. So Paul is born with some exceptional abilities. However, this is all explained in universe as to why this is true. And granted,
Yeah.
Paul is born with some things. He does have to work at them slightly, but it's explained why he doesn't just have them. It's explained why he has them. That's why I make the case that Paul is not a Mary Sue. But closing out the article, but she's found her peace with it. Quote, you can't control a term. Nobody does after a while, she says. It's like children. You raise them and you say, oh my gosh, what's happened here? And off they go. And you're pleased to get a call 40 years later from Smithsonian to talk about them.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, she definitely made a cultural impact. That's for sure.
And that's the other thing
I
is
guess-
this is several decades removed. So yes, they probably view the term differently now than they did then.
Oh, sure.
Back
I
then
think
they were
that's so-
probably like, I can't believe all these little Mary Sues
Yeah.
writing their stories.
That's so interesting though, because my I always thought it was like a random teenage girl who wrote this really like I had no idea it was satire.
See,
had
I
no
didn't
idea it
either.
was
But the
satire,
thing
yeah.
is, like, that's the narrative that's even on the internet today. How I found this out was because I wanted to find the entire story, and I
Yeah.
came across this article, and I'm like, and instantly when I read that it was a parody, I'm like, oh my god, this makes 1,000% more sense.
Yeah, because to me, there's a difference between a character having a natural innate ability and like she walks onto the Enterprise and everyone's instantly her best friend, and then she brings herself back to life at the end after tragically dying. Those are two kind of different things.
Yes, that is, yeah. That is why you watch The Final Frontier, because we have fun and you learn shit.
I learned shit today. I wasn't expecting that when I was rewatching that boring pilot. I wasn't
Wild.
expecting to learn something today.
Wild. But I digress. It is now time to end the episode. Although, oh no, I had a second ad break, didn't I?
I believe you did. I had not done a second. No, wait. Yes, because you did the Christopher Walken impression. going
That's
into it.
right. I did, but okay. Alas, it is time. We have come to the end of this two-part episode, done in one part for your, saving you some time. But
And us.
yeah, and us. I saved us a lot of time. We did the same thing.
Yeah.
We did the same thing they did. We saved on production time.
Yeah, we absolutely. Man, we are filthy, filthy hypocrites.
We're not really. I didn't really
Run
give him
clips
grief.
from
I
the
thought-
next episode, editor Jake. No.
Yeah. Tune in next time. And you know what? You know what you did? You forgot the Paramount Plus synopsis.
No, I did at the beginning.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, there wasn't much. It was just basically like it was like Spock is in trouble and Pike was back. Pike was back and
Pike.
it's a two-parter.
Hype was back. Well, tune in next time. And you're gonna try to do your little guessing game here. Join us next week when we watch and go over and talk about The Conscience of the King.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, clearly they're going to a planet with a monarchy, and I'm guessing my base guess is this is going to be about trying to convince a king like not to do something bad or like instilling democracy into a failing monarchy because of the 1960s and this is the Cold War.
No.
Dang, am I close?
No.
Oh, dang. See, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna come back next week, and I'm gonna be like, "You were so right. I was so far off." Hard cut to me being very wrong.
You got me on one. You got me on the Naked Time being about time travel because I literally didn't remember that. But
yeah, that was funny. Well, yeah, we'll see. Turns out I'm actually right next week. Again, hard cut to clips of next week of me being like, I was very wrong.
let's just say Scooby and the gang need not have been called.
So is being a starship captain 90% just sitting in a chair and looking contemplative?
It seems extremely careless given what's going on to let this play happen.